Welcome to Lesson 1 in Unit 17, Structure, Function, and Survival. In this lesson, students will work to answer the question, how are animals and plants able to survive where they live? Students review the concept of adaptation through readings, videos, and specific examples of plants and animals. They figure out that organisms have physical and behavioral adaptations that allow them to survive in a particular habitat. Several ELA connections are present in the reading opportunities throughout this lesson, which will take about 3 days. Start by framing the unit for students. Teachers may want to ask students if they have ever been to the butterfly house or the insectarium at the St. Louis Zoo and what those habitats were like. Teachers will introduce students to the unit phenomenon by showing them a video of a news anchor being scared of a bug. Teachers can ask students questions to get them thinking about how different organisms use their body structures in order to survive. Throughout the unit, students will focus on the design challenge, how can we design an ideal habitat for an insect? Take any questions they have about this design challenge. In the engage portion of this lesson, teachers will introduce the unit phenomenon to students by showing this video of a news anchor reacting to a bug. Teachers can ask students if they have ever had a similar reaction when they were scared of a bug or other creatures before. Make a chart of student questions they may have about this video so that you can track them throughout the unit. You may want to guide student questions toward the topics of why the man responded like he did. Teachers, it is important that you do not answer these questions at this time. Students should build answers to these questions as they move throughout this unit. After discussing the video, teachers will facilitate a brief class discussion about what living things need to survive. After taking a few answers, the class should come up with a list that includes basic needs such as water, air, food, shelter, and space. In the explore portion of this lesson, students will be divided to work in small groups to identify the animal on their animal habitat and adaptation cards and discuss the habitat in which their animal lives. As they are working, teachers can circulate and ask groups what each of the organisms have in common or what makes each unique. Students may respond that organisms have certain life requirements in common, such as air, food, and water. In the explain portion of this lesson, students will observe animal characteristics through a video discussion and a reading. At this point, students should now share the information they wrote down on student page 2 with the rest of the groups. Ask the students to consider what would happen if the frog was placed in the desert. Keep a record of student thoughts if the frog would survive and push students to justify their response. If needed, guide the students in their thinking by asking them to consider the frog's current habitat, the food it eats, and how it gets what it needs to survive. Ask them to think about a dry desert and how this environment is very different than a wetland or a pond habitat the frog normally lives in. Next, show students the following video on different habitats around the world. This may generate more student questions about what organisms need to survive. After the video, give students the reading about animal adaptations. You may want to have them read individually, in partners, or whole group. After reading, have students work in small groups to summarize the main idea of the text. You may want to use a strategy such as discussion diamond or a think, pair, share. As a class, be sure to define adaptation, structure, and behaviors from this reading. You may also choose to include these additional videos about habitats if your students need more information. The elaborate portion of this lesson is a read aloud of either book, Tree of Life or Desert Giant. Check your kit ahead of time to see which book you have been given. You'll find a read-aloud guide for both books in the teacher pages. This ELA connection will help you start a conversation about different adaptations that organisms need to survive and refer back to the lesson question, how are plants and animals able to survive where they live? As you read the book, you should have students record the different examples of plant and animal adaptations, including both structural and behavioral, on chart paper. Later lessons will more deeply address specific adaptations of living things as well as differences between plants and animals. At this point in the unit, the focus is on general adaptations of living things. You may want to also use these extension options for students to read more about the plant in the story. You could have students read and summarize the text in groups or individually. If students have questions about what they discuss in the read aloud, teachers can also show this video called You at the Zoo. Students should think about how different plants obtain and store water, protect themselves from being eaten, and spread their seeds. Student responses from this video may include examples of cactus needles, root storage, thorns, winged seeds, and fleshy fruit. In the Evaluate portion of this lesson, students will complete a formative assessment. After students complete their answers, refer back to the video of the news anchor being startled by the bug. Teachers can have students discuss in pairs why they think the phenomenon of the person reacting to the bug relates to survival. Students may respond that all organisms have structures and behaviors called adaptations that help them survive. If students have not mentioned this, teachers can note that maybe the news anchor's response was a behavior that would help him survive if that insect were dangerous. By the end of this lesson, students will have reviewed the concept of adaptation through readings, videos, and several different organism examples. They will have identified physical and behavioral adaptations of plants and animals that allow these organisms to survive in a particular habitat. By reviewing the general concept of adaptation and habitat requirements, this lesson sets the foundation for the next lesson, where students will specifically explore external structures, also known as adaptations, of various plants and animals.